right? What is your story to kind of getting to where you are today? Because I assume a lot of people going to grad school, at least a lot of my lab mates, when a lot of them want to be professors. Basically, everyone wanted to be a professor. That seemed to be the main career people wanted to be. But so, what led you down this path?
Yeah, so there's two kind of big things that led me down. So it's definitely not a path I was aiming for what that's worth. It was something that just presented itself. Center for Open Science had started in the town I was in, finishing my PhD at the same time, and I kind of stumbled upon Brian and rattled and lost train of thought multiple times. And in the end, he was like, "Do you want to work for us and do this project?" And I was like, "Yes." But the reason any of this was interesting, I think, is like kind of, like I said, two things. One is those Bayer MGen reports. Like I remember when those first came out, I was in grad school, and those really caused a huge stir. And it was so much finger pointing. Like that's what everyone thought it was, right? It was, and I've met the folks that are on the authors on that, and like good for them for doing it. By the way, they stuck their neck out there pretty far and got some pretty, some threats and other things that happened, which is also very sad to hear. But that caused an alarm because it was like the first time someone was willing to write in like the Wall Street, journal as well, right? There is a problem. But the problem that I think I had, and especially in the academic space, was everyone was like, "Oh, industry's just pointing the finger at us," and I was like, "Are they pointing the finger at us? Are they just actually telling us what's going on?" So I found it like a hard problem, right? Which is like, what is going on? And the reason I think I found it more hard is I was having problems myself, right? Like I in my grad work, at one point I had to replicate. I decided to replicate, right, a key experiment of a finding that was just published in the lab I was in. So I was going to follow up, do some cool experiments afterwards, but I was like, well, step one, I've got to make sure I can get the same result. So let's do it again. I spent months and months in the lab. Now, this is really important, right? I'm in the lab that did the work. I started again with the paper. The paper had, just like I told you, it was just like the state of the art. It had no methods. It did the whole thing that I just told you. Had a reference that went back in time about 20 years. And I was like, is that really what you did? No, that's not what you did. You're just referencing the paper that roughly explains what you did. So again, I'm in the lab. So now I'm like uniquely positioned to have this information. It's not public. I went through all the notebooks. I actually had the person. I could talk to the student that, well, at that point I graduated. So we would sit down. And at one point we were talking about like the way I pipette. And I was like, oh my gosh, it can't be the way I'm pipetting. Like, why would that matter? So I eventually, I think 6-8 months later, eventually was like, okay, I'm going to give it one last shot. I'm going to throw everything at it, all the variations I can to see if I can figure it out. And I did. It was one way that this cell biology experiment would work. One way. And I was like, oh, I finally figured it out. I found out all the secret ingredients that no one else in the entire world will ever be able to figure it out because like I had access to resources and I had to do it myself. And then two, I was like, what? It's only one way? This is really disturbing. Like, is this what I should be doing going forward? I'm not so sure. Why do I want to base it on like, the type of, material I'm using to like permealize cells? Why does that matter so much that only one way does it actually give you the result that was published in the paper? That experience, which is, I think, kind of similar to what you were just trying to tell me from your end, right? That really opened my eyes to like, wow, we are really inefficient as an enterprise, right? Like the research process is, I always knew it was hard. I actually like it being hard, but this seemed like the hard stuff that I didn't want to do, which is trying to repeat, right? It's spending months and months. And then, again, Bayer MGen came out. I was like talking to other students. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one having this problem. And to me, I think that this opportunity just motivated me to be like, yes, okay, cool. So let's figure out what is going on. And again, I think doing it in the open was the most fun thing because it doesn't just show you what the challenges are, it also shows you what's working. And I think people we tend to forget that in the narrative. I actually find that more interesting, which is we did replicate results. This whole process worked. There's a lot of really cool research that we were able to just pick up and do it again. And that's awesome, right? That's confidence. That's what you want. The problem is half the time was the reverse, right? I can't get the same result.